So welcome, Charlie Lawson. It's fantastic to have you on the podcast today.
Thank you, Caroline. Good to be here. And when I get called Charlie Lawson, it's usually because I'm in trouble. Or it's that or Charles. If I hear Charles, then I'm really in trouble.
Okay, that will be my secret signal that things have been long term. No,
good to be on.
Really great to have you, Charlie. Thank you. Now, my audience have already heard all about you in my introduction, so I've given them your full bio. They know all the amazing things you do in the world. But I'm going to ask you some questions and get stuck into your experience and really give the opportunity to share your extensive knowledge on a subject that is very close and very dear to my listeners, my audience's heart, and that is networking, or in your case, specifically, unnatural.
Yeah, unnatural. I like the word unnatural.
I'll ask you about that and where that's come from, but I want to start by just acknowledging how impressed I am with you having led. I wrote in my notes that you leading by example. So how we got to know each other is you started cropping up on my LinkedIn. I saw comments by you and you were tagging me in posts about imposter syndrome, posts about lawyers, and your name just kept coming up. And then I started seeing your posts more. And then before we know it, I'm thinking, who do I want to get on the podcast to talk about networking? It's Charlie Lawson. Now, tell me about that. How did that happen?
Well, I think it's all networking, honestly. I think some people look at networking on social platforms, be that LinkedIn, where a lot of people probably listening to this podcast or watching this will be, or other social platforms. Honestly, I think you can read the same into them. It's all networking. So many people look at those platforms or go on those platforms to, I don't know, maybe show off, maybe look at me type posts, if I can put it that way. I feel very uncomfortable with that, and we'll probably cover a bit more about that in a bit when we get into my real unnaturalness. I don't think unnaturalness is a word, but we'll go with it for now. Anyway. But yeah, what I use LinkedIn for primarily is to network, to get to know people. And what that means is, if we're going to the true meaning of what networking is, that's building relationships with people, talking to people, saying hello, seeing who responds, seeing what happens. And I guess that's exactly what I did in terms of, put a comment on a couple of posts, you start the dialogue, you start engaging, and that's the way I suggest people network. A lot of people don't do it like that. That should be clear. But yeah, that's broadly speaking what happened. I think you then, you see it, who's this guy? You notice it, you start to engage, and you start to build a relationship, and that's exactly what happened, I think.
Yeah, and what a fantastic example for your people, for my people, that it does actually work. And that's one of the things that I know my clients ask me, my lawyer clients ask me, what's the point of it all? There's so much effort, it doesn't even work. And I must admit, sometimes I think all of this effort I'm going to, does it actually work? So it's always great. We want to be always hearing, I think, and talking about examples of how we ended up having opportunities or how we got to know people, because it will really reinforce the value of what networking is. So thank you for that, because of course I get so much value out of you reaching out to me. So it's always mutual as well. How important is that, Charlie, is that mutual element to networking?
Well, I think it has to be. Networking is, going back to it, it's building relationships. I can't build a relationship on my own. You can't build a relationship on your own. You've got, a relationship by its very nature is obviously the link between two people. Yeah. Now, obviously, you can bring other people into that mix, within a network, within a group. You might have a network of 10, 15,000 people. There's lots of little relationship links there. But in the end, each relationship is between two people. Yeah. And it's the power of those relationships that really makes the difference. When you get to know someone, like them, and trust, you heard the phrase know, like, trust, I'm sure. Yeah. When you get to know someone, get to like them over time, and after a bit more time, get to trust them, then that relationship can be very, very powerful, very fruitful. So yeah, it's the connection between two people. And I do think, rant mode alert, I think the world doesn't prioritize enough how to build those relationships. The education system, for example. My son's secondary school, I'm a governor at the school. I've just been elected as a governor there, and the pitch I sort of stood on, if you like, because you have to get elected into the role, is that I don't think the education system, not his school's fault, by the way, I think it's just the way the world is, doesn't teach us how to build meaningful relationships. And if I think back to when I was in the education system, when I was at university, I did a business degree. I don't think I've used anything from my business degree in my career so far. I probably something, but basically haven't used any. They never taught me though how to build relationships, how to ask for help, how to get to know people, how to ask good questions, how to respond, how to listen, all those sort of you call them soft skills, I guess, but they're all go into building relationships, and I think they're so important in starting and building and maintaining those relationships.
That's such an interesting point. Wouldn't that be amazing if we learned that at a really young age? Because half of the, we can get into this straight away now, talking about a lot of the issue with networking. It's not that people don't believe networking is important or that's a thing you should do often. What stops them from doing it is the thought, well, I don't really know how, like, it's awkward and I'm not outgoing. I'm not a naturally gregarious person. So on that note, tell me about how you came to be the Unnatural
Networker. Yeah, whisper it. I love networking. No, I've said that wrong. I'm good at networking. I'm great at networking, but whisper it. I hate networking. Could quite happily avoid it if I possibly could. Now, let's just qualify that. Let's just make sure we understand what that means. Tell you what, I'll go back in history first. So my previous business, sold the business last year, was an organization called BNI. Some of your listeners may well have heard it. It's a networking referral organization, primarily for small business. But as I say, it's a networking organization. And there was I heading it up in the UK and Ireland. It was I ran the business in the UK and Ireland. There were two of us that ran the business, my business partner, Tim, and myself. And I always like to say, it is absolute the truth. Tim did all the work, when it came to contracts, spreadsheets, the operations of the business. He did all the work, and I don't have any hesitation.
I'm sure he'd like to say that as well, actually.
Oh yeah, it's totally him, and he knows full well that was the case. But I was there as, if you like, the public face of the business. The founder of the business was over in the US, so there wasn't anyone in the UK who would be standing out, out front, going out and doing speaking, going and meeting people, doing the PR, if you like, for the organization. And so that was my role. And so many people said, you've got to write a book. If you're going to go and get speaking opportunities, if you're going to, publicize the organization, you've got to have a book. So I thought, okay, I've got to have a book. I didn't think necessarily I wanted to have a book, but there you go. When enough people say it, you've got to have a book.
Exactly.
So I started writing this book, and the phrase writer's block. I'd sit there for ages.
I know it well.
Blank screen, and there's just nothing coming. I mean, a few words here and there, but nothing was really coming. It was always going to be, a networking 101 guide. Anyway, I was chatting with Tim, the business partner in the office one day, and we realized that both of us are the same on this. We don't really like networking. We would quite happily, if we could, avoid all networking. Now, I qualify that by saying there's all sorts of different types of networking. I could have some mates round for dinner or go for a drink with a friend, and that could be described as networking, because you're doing exactly the same as what you do in networking, because it's just talking to people and getting to know them. But thinking about the big event, you go to the event, there's lots of people talking, there's lots of network, you've got to go in there and get yourself out there. That's often the phrase that we hear, and it's certainly in the legal industry. I've heard people, got to go out there, get your name out there, get out networking.
And the big difference is it's with people you don't know, as opposed to
with people you don't know. Yeah. And that's the kind of networking that I struggle with. And look, it's not that I can't do it. It's not. I know that I can go into a room and I can talk to people. I know I can. It's just not my comfort zone. It's just not where what I enjoy doing necessarily. So we realised, and this is where the name. There's a conversation with Tim we were having one day. It was like, I'm an unnatural networker. And when I going back to the book, I started writing it under the premise, the Unnatural Networker. It flowed. I mean, it's the same content in the sense that it's networking 101, just how to guide, if you like, to networking, but it's from the perspective of someone who'd rather not be doing it at all. That's what I mean by unnatural networking. And it was drawn home to me. I remember it was years ago, the very first speaking gig I ever did, proper speaking gig, if you like. And there were 3 speakers on that day. I didn't know the other 2. I was the third one on, and the first guy was speaking, and he started talking about some bits of networking. And I was sat in the audience going, oh, God, I'm change conversation. Can I surreptitiously get up to the AV guy, swap a few slides? I mean, that was never going to happen. So I thought, okay, just going to have to go with this. But then he told a story about a networking faux pas in his experience. And the the story went something along the lines of he'd done his research, he'd seen on the delegate list, right, so-and-so was there. This person was really a good contact for him. And he spotted him at the far side of the room, thought, right, I'm going to go and speak to him. And he charged up to him and talked to him. The faux pas was that he'd interrupted a conversation because the guy was talking to someone else at the time. I was like, okay, I get that's a faux pas. That's just interrupting someone. That's kind of obvious. My challenge with that is I wouldn't have had the guts to go up to him in the first place. I wouldn't have had the feeling, okay, am I worthy to go and speak to this person who seems so high up there? And, I just wouldn't have done it in the first place. So it was at that point that I realized this unnatural networker thing really struck a chord. And what I find is, whenever I speak, whenever I talk to an audience, whenever I'm training an audience, I'll sort of check in who feels a little bit unnatural when it comes to networking, maybe a bit shy, maybe a bit of an introvert, maybe just don't like being hard sold. All those kind of things feel a bit awkward when it comes to networking. And every single audience I've ever spoken to, it's always a majority, 2/3 to 3/4 of the audience will say, yeah, that resonates with me. So
really,
there's a lot of people out there, and especially I find in legal and professional services, industries where there's a big focus on, detailed task-based roles. People listeners to this podcast will have got into the legal profession because they like law.
Yes.
They don't necessarily like business development, and then they get into the world of law and they're told, off you go and get out there and get your name out there and go and network. So they're the people that I tend to help the most.
That's so fascinating. So so much I want to pick out of what you just said there. First of all, the idea that you don't have to like it to be good at it, I think is fascinating, because especially if I think about my clients and my audience, they're all high achievers. They take pride in this kind of operating at a certain level, and kind of the underlying premise of so much of that is I like it and therefore I'm good at it. And maybe that's something we also develop from school days. I don't know. I know I did a history degree, right, at university. And one of the reasons I chose history is because I liked it and I was good at it. So there is this attachment to being liking something in order to be good at it. I think a lot of people have. So what's fascinating, one of the many things that's fascinating about that for me is that idea and that message to people. Look, it's okay that you don't like it, and you don't need to like it in order to be good at it and for it to work really well for you. Is that a fair sort of?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, look, I've made a career out of doing networking and I don't like it. So yeah, if I can be proof of anything, then I've hopefully I'm not the exception that proves the rule, but yeah, I definitely would see something in that.
Example, yeah.
And there's other examples. I mean, like the way I see my business going forward is I'd like to find other unnaturals. I'll give you a couple of, for instances. I'd like to build a business over time, and I'd be very clear here. Mine is a relatively new business. I only sold the BNI business in the last 18 months or so. So this is still what I would describe as a new business. But I see potential to have other people who have their own discipline, be that entrepreneurship, be that sales, be that management, be that leadership, but whatever, it doesn't matter. And all of them, I want them to be from the perspective of the unnatural, because
nice. Yeah.
You can follow the advice of someone who is passionate. The example I often give is cooking. You see a celebrity chef on TV. We've all seen the programs. I'm rubbish at cooking. Let's just be very clear about that. But you see the celebrity chef on TV. They do that because they love it. They're just passionate about cooking. They just love it. And you see them chopping up the veg, like this, and it's just chopping it. I mean, I'd just slice my fingers off. There's no question that's what would happen. But then you just bung a bit of this in and toss a bit of that in, and suddenly, whoa, hey presto, you got a lovely meal.
Yeah.
That's because for someone who can't follow that, can't be. I mean, I try and follow it. And I'm like,
yeah.
You produce a finishing result. It looks nothing like what the expert's done. So I really like taking it from the angle of someone who has to think about it, has to approach it in a different way. As I say, I have everything I teach about networking, I've had to teach myself. Oh, earbuds just fallen out. Sorry. Everything I do when it comes to networking, I've literally had to either force myself to do it or teach myself how to do it. So that benefit of learned experience means a more empathetic message to the people who hear it. So yeah, I think there's a lot in that.
I think so too. And I think what I'm really picking up, I mean, you're saying I'm looking and you have your radar out for all of the people who aren't naturally good at something or naturally passionate, and yet want to learn it, right? And it's that, giving them that, I'm going to use the word hack. It's not hack so much, but it is a way to do something you didn't otherwise think you could do. And I'm thinking about what you just said about it being the majority of people in the room. Did I understand that correctly? It's more than you think find networking hard, right?
At least it will understand it feels a bit awkward, feels a bit tough. They have to make themselves do a little bit. They've got elements of that
for them. And that's when I think about my audience and my imposter syndrome audience, and how for whom walking into a room full of people you don't know can be like extremely challenging, because what you've also got going on is the, do I even belong here, right? Should I be in this room? I don't deserve this. I don't deserve my success. I don't have that ownership over where they are and how they've got to that level. So already they've got that whole mind drama, I like to call it, going on in their brains before they go in about should they even be in the room, let alone should I be talking to people I don't know, let alone, again, going over to the person who they've identified as being senior and a person that they really benefit from knowing. So it's so interesting and useful for my audience to hear that, as with so much thinking around imposter syndrome, you think it's just you and everybody else has got it figured out. Everyone else does it naturally. That's what you said to me is there's so many people out there, you're not alone.
The classic example of that is whenever and I mean, this will happen at any event that I go to at any point, and this has been throughout the entirety of my career. So this isn't something that happened 20 years ago and I'm now got used to it. I go to a networking event, and when you walk in the room, maybe there's you go in the venue, might be a hotel or a bar or a restaurant, whatever it is, and you go in, and then there's the room over there just to the side, and you can see in that room everyone's there, everyone's congregated because it's a networking event. It's a buzzy energy, there's lots of noise, there's things going on. My overriding thought whenever I'm standing there waiting to go in their room is I look at everyone and think, God, they look like they know what they're doing, and I'm the only one who doesn't. And I know rationally 5 minutes before, when they walked in, they probably felt very similar. A lot of them will have done. And I also know that 5 minutes later, I'll have got into a conversation and I'll be fine. Of course I will. But I still have that slight awkwardness when it comes. So and lots of people do. If you have that listening to this, then don't worry. I'm a networking expert and I have that. So
I know the network,
don't worry about it.
But the unnatural networker feels it all the time. I think that's going to be so reassuring for a lot of people. Right, I want to change tack a little bit, Charlie, because I was slightly stalking you on social media, as you do when you're going to interview somebody who's an expert. Yep. I saw you ran the Ironman recently.
I did, yeah.
Ran, cycled, swum it. I actually had to look up what the Ironman was, because I just know it's this like huge thing that I will never do, because it sounds really, because
never say never. The unnatural Ironman contestant,
Exactly. Tell me about that. Why on earth? Well, first of all, tell my audience what the Ironman is, and then
what Ironman is. Okay, yeah.
You did that.
Okay, so don't freak out when you hear this. This is not me saying you have to do this, or Caroline saying you have to do this. This is just a thing that strange, weird people do. So it's a triathlon. It's the longest triathlon of all the regular ones. I'll explain that. Every triathlon is always swim, bike, run in that order. It has to be in that order because you start in a wetsuit typically, and it would be a faff to put a wetsuit on halfway through. So you always start with the swim. Wetsuit comes off you go on the bike. Quick change, and then another quick change, and off you do your run. And then there's 5 levels of triathlon. Sprint triathlon, the shortest. Super sprint triathlon is the shortest. Then sprint. Then Olympic. So when you see the one in the Olympic Games, that's the Olympic distance. That's the kind of standard distance you like. Then you got the longer ones, which are half Ironman and a full Ironman.
Wow.
So the full Ironman is deep breath here. 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike, and then a marathon, so 26.2 miles. And it's a little bit crazy, a little bit mad. But why did I get into it? I've always been a runner. I love running. I did the London Marathon a few years ago. Absolutely loved it. Raised money. I lost my dad a few years ago, and I raised money for the charity of cystic fibrosis, which what he had. But I loved it so much. It's my me time. It's obviously it's physical exercise, but it's also my mental me time as well. And I just knew that the amount I love running, if I carried on running every day like that, I'd knacker myself. I'd do my knees in or something. Right. And I guess I've got a goal that I want to still be able to go for a run when I'm in old age, whatever old age looks like for me, that I still want to be able to go and run. So I just said, take the pressure off, go swimming, biking, or running, do triathlons. And as soon as I started doing that, I did the first triathlon. I thought, right, I'm going to have to do an Ironman. And,
I love that that's your way of taking the pressure off. That's absolutely hilarious. So the reason I wanted to bring that up, first of all, like selfishly, because I'm very into my fitness. I post a lot about my, I was outside in a park doing ridiculous things with my lifting weights and doing different weird squats with my PT. So I share a lot of that on social media. It's a really important part of who I am. And I also want to inspire my lawyers who are very sedentary to be out and moving. Yeah. So very, very fascinating just from the purely physical perspective. But also what I really wanted to really hear was the why behind it. So what I've certainly picked up from what I've read about you and what you've written is how important that why is. So your reason for doing something is what enables you to do something that previously you thought you couldn't or you found really hard. So you said, I've seen you say that actually when you like knowing your why and being able to share that is a really key, it's a great strategy for building relationships. Can you speak a bit more to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's a fun, I mean, look, don't get me wrong. This is probably a more advanced networking technique. And so you're not going to go and try if you're contemplating going to a networking event, you're a bit nervous and you just want to get through it, then probably this isn't quite the stage for that. But once you've got to build a relationship with someone, I think you can really strengthen it by being clear on your why. I'll give it, for instance, the case study I did in my second book, The Unnatural Promoter, which we haven't talked about quite yet.
We will.
Cover a bit. Sorry, I just lost my screen for a sec. Are you still there?
I can still see you.
Everything just went blank, but it's now come back. So we're still there. So yeah, this is a case study that was in my second book, The Unnatural Promoter. It was about a lady I knew in BNI, actually, a lady called Kate Bourne. She's based up in Manchester. She nothing to do with lawyers. She's not in that industry at all. She was in a dead-end job and really struggled, and was just thinking, this isn't where I want to be. And she just said to herself, look, one day she got pregnant basically. And when she was pregnant, she was just thinking, I'm in this dead-end job. I can't bring my soon to be child into this world and be in a position where I just feel so downtrodden, so miserable about my existence. And that's honestly where she felt. So she said, right, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to start a business. Always thought, right, entrepreneurship is where she wanted to be in one day, but had never taken the plunge. Took the plunge to do it, and really into baking. So she started baking cakes, basically, celebration cakes for weddings and events and so on.
Yeah.
And cut a long story short, because there's more to it. When her baby was born, there were some challenges. She had challenges in childbirth. Both her and her daughter, Amelie, they had some challenges. They're both fine now. They were both in intensive care for a few days. Everything's fine now. Amelie's about 5 years old now, so certainly no issue there. But effectively, what she wanted to do, she wanted to start this business, and especially if she was lying there in this intensive care unit, thinking, I've got to do this right for my daughter. I've got to do this. This is the most important thing I can do. I can't be giving my daughter, an example of me not, doing what I want, not being happy in my life because I want to do professionally. So that created her drive to set up a business.
Yeah.
And she set it up, and it became very successful. Now, pause that and just say, Kate could be out promoting her business, and she say, I really want to get some referrals to do some, do cakes. Do you know anyone getting married? I love doing wedding cakes. That would be a great referral for me. That she could promote herself networking like that. But how much more effective it would be if she tells the story about, what, I started up my business because of my daughter. My daughter, I wanted to set her an example to make a difference in the world. I wanted to make a difference for myself in the world, but I wanted crucially to set an example for my daughter, Amelie. Doing that, to do that, I set up my cake business. I love doing it. It's brilliant. I'd really love to get any wedding cakes that anyone getting married to do their wedding cake. How much stronger is that promotion of her when you tie it into why she does what she does?
Yes. So
I think it's fundamental to, like I say, networking is about building relationships. And if you want to really get to know someone, you've got to know why they do what they do. I think it's so important.
Yeah, I think so too. And it's a great opportunity, I think, to get beyond the kind of small talk bit. I mean, you don't really need to like lead with a like, why do you do what you do? But when you treat the other person as a human being but with a story, like I love the idea. And when I go networking, I always get myself into the mindset that like everybody's a human being, everybody's got a fascinating story to tell. And also, and this is one of my favorite things, is this everybody's got something. I can always learn something from somebody else. And so that just that human connection, treating somebody else as a human, but you presenting yourself as a human being, i.e. with a story, with a why, can be really powerful way of breaking the ice and of building that connection quickly. That's been my experience for sure as well.
Yeah, I think it can. And I mean, you know, you say you wouldn't necessarily lead with the question, why do you do what you do? But I tell you what, it's a hell of a lot more interesting than what do you do? I mean, you might start with, so what do you do? But then tell us how you got into that. Why do you do that? You know, that's going to be a more interesting, open conversation than, you know,
the standard, what do you do? Yeah, that's.
Oh, you're a lawyer. Great, thanks. And
I know.
Nothing else to say. So, and the other one, if you want to perhaps go in, maybe that's, as I said, that is an advanced networking. You're not going to necessarily, as you say, you're not going to lead with that for you know, with your deepest why. But here's a great question. My favorite networking question is, what are you into? And let's just qualify what I mean by that. You've got a free day. You've got no obligations to anyone. Family, they're all sorted. You know, do whatever you want. How do you feel your day? Because when you ask someone that, they'll tell you really what they're into. Now, obviously, if they come up with anything running triathlon related, them and I, we're off. We're on a conversation. Yeah. It's easy. Yeah. And the advantage of that is you make, instead of it being, let's be honest, are all networking conversations really interesting? No, some of them are really boring. Let's be quite clear about it. And for the unnatural networker, I need to make sure that, you know, it's enough of a push to get me going in the first place. So I'd rather have a fun, interesting conversation so we can find common ground between us. Then that's great. If, and quite often this happens, you know, they're not into the same things as me. I had a lady the other week, I was at an Unnatural Network event, and she told me she was into crochet. Now, I know nothing about crochet. I really don't know anything.
What was your immediate response, your face? Did you like, were you...
The thing was, because she was talking about something she was passionate about, everything flowed from that. I was fascinated. She was showing me pictures on her phone. Like, I made this quilt, and it's on my daughter's bed, and it was that kind of. I was like, wow, it was just so cool. But because I saw the passion that this came from, we built a relationship around it. Now, it also helps when you follow up with them, because if it's someone you really want to follow, you can lead with. Often you meet lots of people at a networking event, and you always remember who everyone is exactly. But I loved hearing what you said about crochet. I loved to hear, it was so fascinating to see that picture. It leads, that gets them back in the zone when you connect with them later and follow up. So I think asking about what they're into is a great networking question, and it moves it more relational than work-based. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And what you just said about then when you follow up is key, isn't it? Let's talk about that, because one of the conversations that comes up with clients a lot is, well, how do I, so I've met them and I need to build a relationship. How do I even do that? How do I follow up afterwards? And actually the seeds of the relationship are all sown in that initial conversation. Like you say, when you're getting to know somebody, if you have, I like to encourage my clients to just go into a networking event and be curious. Let that be the emotion that drives how you listen, how you speak, what you say. Because everything that they tell you, everything you hear another person saying, is the potential for you to follow up on afterwards. And that brings me to kind of how you follow up in terms of giving. You talk a lot about how those initial stages of the relationship are about giving. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Can you talk a bit more about that? Like, what do you give to somebody who's new to that concept of following up afterwards? What do you mean?
Well, look, let's rewind out, just zoom out just for a second and say, look, the whole point of going networking is to make not to make sales, that's too strong, but you want to bring clients in. There's got to be a return on the time invested in networking. The thing is, and this is what leads so many people to do it wrong and approach it with a hard sell approach, is to say, right, got to make some sales, got to get to the point of hard selling at the event itself. And that is the biggest waste of time, because let's face it, whoever goes networking with the intention of buying anything, no one does. So it's just pointless trying to sell anything. But come back to the question, following up. I want, hopefully, to, maybe they're a prospect who I could do business with, but more often the case, there'll be someone who has access to people who would be good for me, i.e. we could be referral partners in some way. I'd like to tap into their network. Let's put it that way. When I go and follow up, the last thing I'll do is talk about sales or referrals, depending which camp they fit in. Let's assume it's someone who can refer me. I will not talk about referrals for me at all.
Right.
But I will talk about how I can help them. Can I give them some advice? Can I give them a bit of value? Can I connect them with anyone? Ask, how can I help?
Yeah.
Sometimes you get people doing a double take, honestly, because they're like, wow,
they're not expecting it.
Exactly.
So I'm trying to translate that for my, like, specifically for my lawyer audience. I'm thinking of solicitors from whether trainees, mid-level, or their senior level going into partnership, and suddenly realizing, oh, I've got to bring in my own clients. I need to be networking. And so if you're that hierarchical point is quite a big deal in the legal profession. So if you are coming away and you've spoken to, say, somebody more senior than you, and you're thinking, okay, well, I will offer to help them. What do you say to the more junior person who thinks, well, how could I possibly help a partner or a senior associate when I'm just like 3 or 4 years qualified? So what do you do when you feel that difference in terms of experience and qualification? You are like intimidated by the other person.
Well, I'm all like, I get the intimidation piece. There's no doubt about that. But I still think that everyone as an individual has something that only they as an individual can bring. Coming from the networking point of view, I say you can bring your network to the party.
Yes.
So who do I know that might be someone that you want to speak to? Who do I know who might be a good contact for you in some way? You know, you look on your LinkedIn profile, you look through your phone, you know, you can go into your contacts on your phone and I know this is the case on an iPhone. I'll do it right now. You go into contacts, and if you look at the A to Z down the side, there's a little hash at the bottom below the Z. Click that and it tells you how many contacts. I've got a few thousand contacts here. I'm not saying I know all of them perfectly to be able to refer someone, obviously, but we all know a lot of people. And I'd say that's something you can leverage and bring to that relationship. Now, there's a couple of bits that come into that. The person there has to be trust there. If there isn't trust there, then you can't refer someone. The idea of a referral from me is that everyone is better off. So the person who gets the introduction, well, they're better off because they got the introduction to someone they wanted to get to. The person, the third party who gets is introduced to this person, well, great, they're getting a need provided, hopefully, or at least the opportunity for a need provided. But that person in the middle, the referrer, I think there's the potential biggest win for them, because effectively they've done something good for two people. And I'm not saying they're owed, because they're not, and it's never reciprocal quite so directly as that. But they've got the outside off chance in the future of two people coming back to them and saying, well, how can I help you? You've helped me out. How can I help you? So I'd say that's the one thing anyone can bring to anyone. Doesn't matter which level you might be talking to. You've got your network, you can use it.
I love that. And so it's so important then. And what I want to sort of just synthesize from that is, don't go in with the assumption that you've got nothing to give, right? There's always something you've got to offer. And as you've said, there's something unique to you that will be valuable to somebody else. And one of the key areas I work with my clients on is on adding value. And we look at different ways to add value within your organization. There's so many different ways, but this is fantastic, right? So networking, building relationships. If you are a more junior lawyer, a more junior business person, and the chances are, I'm going to make a very wild assumption here, you have a much bigger network on social media than, say, the most senior partner and much older people who are less, quite possibly, right, who are less either interested or enjoy being on social media. So suddenly then, who has the greatest potential to add value in terms of introductions and referrals? It's the person with the bigger network, or who's more active on social media and used to building relationships that way. So there's always something that you have that you can offer another person, as you've said. I love that. That's fantastic. So I want to talk about mindset, Charlie, because that was a little bit of mindset stuff instead of like, go into a networking event believing you have value to offer, a really important belief to have about yourself. So I loved looking at your website. I did your test Charlie?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you my score in a minute, but first of all, can you just tell the listeners what the test is so they know what we're talking about?
Yeah, sure. It's a little test. It's on my website, and it essentially says, how good at networking are you? And I mean, it's a bit of a, you're browsing online. How good at networking am I? Well, I'm brilliant at it. It's designed to try and grab people in that sense. But it's a little test you can do. Takes 3 or 4 minutes, a few multi-choice questions, nothing too hard, or hopefully not too hard. And once you've done it, it's free. You get a little report personalized to you with maybe a couple of suggestions that would help you move your networking forward. So by all means, go and check that out, and be delighted to have you have a look at that for sure.
Definitely. Look, I recommend it. You can do it super quickly now. So I did the test, and my score was 62%. Okay.
It was, yes.
Well, because I'm an ex-lawyer and I've got that kind of overachieving brain. I'm, have imposter syndrome. So for me, like having top scores is very, very important. So I'm like, what? 62%. And then I looked at the breakdown. So there's 4, I'm not going to spoil the surprise, but there's basically 4 different categories, right? Correct?
Right, yeah.
Now, one of them was on your mindset, right? Your networking mindset. And I'm happy to say I scored 90% in that. I was very proud. I didn't do very well in some of the others, which is what brought my score down. But this was fascinating to me. So I wanted to talk a little bit about mindset. What would you say? A lot of my clients, it wouldn't actually even occur to them to think about what their networking mindset is. Like, why is that important? Why is that one of your 4 key areas that you look at and work on?
At the base level, I think it's a big reason for it is because so many people get or don't get networking. They get it completely wrong. We talked earlier about how people can use it as honestly a selling process. How many times have you been networking and someone's immediately tried to hard sell you, or you've connected on LinkedIn and immediately there's an auto reply that comes back and says, hey, we got 20% off our course, whatever thing they're selling at that particular time. And so many people get that wrong, and that's a big part of where I'm going with it. But yeah, once you've got the mindset that networking is about building relationships, it's about what that can mean. If you think, here's another one. We mentioned it again earlier. You might be we were talking about when we were talking about following up. It might be that person is someone that you could do business with, but much more likely it's that they know someone who would be a good client for you. So when you go to a room of people, let's say there's, 50 people at a networking event you go to, pick a number, doesn't matter. How many potential customers are there? Well, you might argue that there's 49. You're one person, there's 49 other people. But that's the wrong mindset for networking for me. Much better is to look at it and say, well, okay, yeah, if those people want to use your services, I'm sure they will. But much more powerful is, who do those people know? If each of those people have 100, 500, 1,000 people in their network, which if they've been around a little while, probably they do. That's not 49 people, that's 49,000 potential customers, making the big assumption that everyone knows 1,000. But you see what I mean?
Absolutely.
It's not who's in the room. That's the mindset shift that I want people to take.
Right.
So yeah, it's what networking is, and the real potential of networking. I think that's where we're driving with the mindset of it. Other things will come into it a bit, when we were talking about the why, for example, why you do what you do. That's approaching it, being open and looking to build relationships. That comes into it as well. But yeah, they're the sort of principles we're talking about.
Yeah, love it. So it's not who's in the room. That is so powerful, because how many times, I know I've done this and I know my clients do this, where they have good intentions. They sign up to go to a networking event. And then on the night, something comes up, or the weather's not great, or they're just not feeling it. On just the number of times you plan to do something ahead, and then when it gets to the moment, you pull out. And sometimes the reason you pull out is because you think, oh, well, I'm not going to meet anybody at that networking event, right? Or that's not going to be that useful to me, or nobody's going, right? Who's important enough. So that messaging around it's not about who's in the room is, I think, so powerful for shifting people's expectations, actually making their expectations of what they can get out of the networking event much, much higher than they would otherwise be.
Definitely.
So to that point of like the challenge of getting yourself out the door, right? When that moment where you're perhaps, especially if you're an unnatural networker like you yourself.
All the best people are, Caroline. Let's just
Right, exactly, like you and I. And so you have that tension between, oh, I know I should, but I don't really feel like it. One of the things that comes up a lot, certainly for me, so I have 4 children, busy life like everybody else. A lot of my clients work very long hours. They've got families, busy lives. I know you, from my stalking you on social media, you go to football matches, you snowboard, I think I saw as well.
Yeah.
We now know you like running, you do Ironmans. So we've all got stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
So how do you convince yourself, or what does it take in that moment where it feels like a pull between like your personal life and getting out and networking for your business? How do you get out the door? How do you balance those two things and get yourself to go to those networking events when it might feel like time away from your other things?
Being brutal, sometimes I don't, honestly. I'm just good. Just I am that unnatural that, sometimes I just think, really, do I have to? And it's or I might go. I mean, this happens with social events sometimes as well. Going to a, maybe a bigger event, maybe not just a Friday night around a mate's house, but going to a big event like a wedding. And I know I won't go and circulate with anyone. I'll just sit and chat to my mates because it's just easier. It's just more fun. So no, there's definitely times where I definitely don't. But I think the key is I always live by the mantra that we don't live to work, we work to live. Mm-hmm. And if you live to work, then, well, you're only ever going to be doing work. What you've got to do is balance the requirement. Obviously, there's a requirement to work. You need to bring business in. You need to, you can't ignore business development, obviously, because otherwise you won't have, when you've serviced all your current clients, what are you going to do? You've got to keep the phone ringing. You've got to keep clients coming through the door. So I just have to set off the fact that, look, I know I'd love to do something passionate about or do something with the family or whatever it may be, but I have to make things work. I have to make my business work, and I'm in that situation right now. As I said, I'm a new business basically, and effectively, I've got a lot of credibility within the world of networking. It's building within my new target markets. Professional services in particular is a big area that I'm focusing on because of the unnatural networkers and the amount of them in those industries. But I don't have massive credibility in that industry yet. It's building over time as I network, as I get to know people, as I build relationships.
Yeah.
But I can't expect that to happen. Click my fingers, right, there we go. Here's an opportunity for you. It just doesn't work like that. And if you're going into networking thinking it's a quick fix, and I think that's maybe at the root of where some people's challenges lie. Think, oh, it's raining out, so I can't be bothered to go out there. Because if I'm not going to get a direct return right then and there, do I want to do it? But that's the point. It's a long-term game. I often look at it. There's 2 approaches. You can take a hunting attitude or a farming attitude. To run through them, it makes sense when I say hunting. Let's take a lion in Africa, a typical African hunts. I'm sure that David Attenborough would have problems with how I'm describing this, but the basic thought process is the lion wakes up, thinks, oh, I'm hungry, best get some food, goes on off at a little hunt, chase scene, kill scene, find some poor stag or antelope, there's food for all the family. What do they do the next day? They've got to go and do it again. So it's a subsistence style of approach. And some people look at networking like that. They'll think, right, there's a group of people, great, I could do some business here, there, and there. Got to go and find some new people. And then it's the energy required to keep that going consistently is very different. Compare that to a farming attitude. I'm going to bring my daughter in, my daughter Maggie May. This was a few years ago, to be fair, when she was about 5. She planted some carrot seeds in the garden. She was so excited about it. I can't, you know what kids are like when they're just so excited. Planted it, and she did it all. Spent a while doing it, and she planted them, and then she looked at me and said, you could see her face almost drop, in fact, but where's the carrots? And I'm like, you just planted them, it's going to take, and obviously that over time, as long as you tend those plants and water them, get sunlight and make sure insects don't get them and everything else, over time, get some carrots. She wanted that instant gratification. I want the carrots back right now. Obviously, over time, they did grow, and over time, you yield the fruit of your, or the vegetables of your labours in this case. And networking is exactly the same. If you spend time tending the relationships, continuing to make sure, plants need sunlight and water. What do you need to give relationships? You need to give them time. You need to give them energy. You need to connect with people. You need to ask them good questions. You need to try and help them. You need to do all the things that you would do to maintain that relationship. And over time, if you do that and don't muck it up, and it's very quick to damage a reputation, let's be honest. And keep doing that and keep helping people, then
you reap the reward. And it's the gift that keeps on giving. So I love that. I think it's so important to think about networking as the one of the best time investments you can make in your career or in your business, which is really a really difficult shift for a lot of my clients, because it's all about time. It's all about the hours you bill, and the hour you're not at your desk, you're not billing, right? And that's
going to say exactly that. I was talking to a lawyer the other day who charged themselves out at whatever it was per hour, and they were going to be at this event for 2 hours, and they said, well, I need to get, that's my return required from that event. I was like, that's just not realistic. You don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know that they're going to, well, they're not probably going to want to do business with you right there and then. We already discussed that. And it's also not about who you're going to meet there, it's who those people know. So it's going to...
I mean, one thing I will offer that I find both sort of helpful and also that's happened with my experience at times, and enough for it to be, I think, also motivating for people who are struggling with that and who are doing those calculations, which is so there's the building of the relationship, and that is the nurturing and the farming, like you say, and then you're just reaping what you sow, and you just keep it going. It's fantastic. And that, I think, is what will sustain you in your career. But I also want to offer that it just takes one conversation as well to make a really big impact. Like, you could be, one of my best examples is I went in and met a lady she was actually a maternity cover, a law firm that I'd been working at, doing coaching work for. And I just went to meet her because she'd taken over the role of the maternity cover role. And we spoke for maybe, Charlie, like 40 minutes, 45 minutes, coffee. It was really lovely. That's the only conversation I had with her. And then 2 years later, but I hadn't had any contact with her in that time, right, directly. However, me showing up on social media, my newsletter goes out. That's one of the ways in which I network. Me still networking within the legal industry. My name came up and I was front of mind. And then 2 years later, as a result of that 40-minute conversation, right, over time, I got the biggest coaching contract I've ever had with a law firm, and the biggest coaching contract that law firm had ever given, right? So I also want to say it is most definitely a time investment, and don't go looking for that immediate cash return on the hours that you are so-called sacrificing away from your billable work. But you don't have to actually talk to 500 people to meet the one person that's going to be a game changer in your business or your career.
I love that about networking. It's the randomness of it in many ways. And you just never know who, that person you bumped into, who do they know? Where does that lead to? And I also call it the butterfly effect of networking. The butterfly effect. Butterfly theoretically flaps its wings one place, and then there's a ripple of events that happen all over the place. Where does business come from? Where do opportunities come from? Well, you met that person through that person. You met them through them. You met them through that person. And you met that person at a networking event 10 years ago. I don't know. I'm just using a random example.
Right.
None of that, you could say that none of those later things would have happened if you hadn't met that person 10 years ago. So when's the best time to go and meet someone? Well, probably 10 years ago. But if second best time, it's right now. So
right now, exactly. So I want to ask you, because I feel like we could get into this, talk for hours about this. It's so fascinating. You're so knowledgeable, obviously, Charlie, on this subject. So while I've got you, I want to pick your brains on some really key questions I know I've had. I've seen, I'm not sure if you've seen come up on LinkedIn, there are quite a few posts coming out now about alcohol and the role of alcohol in corporate culture, and the suggestion that alcohol be even banned from corporate social events, right? Or certainly it's starting to be more questioned. There are lots of people who, there's two perspectives here I want to look at. One is the person who feels that they're not very comfortable networking and uses or likes the idea of using alcohol as a bit of a prop or a bit of a softener for them. So it's a bit of a prop. And then from the perspective of the unnatural networker who doesn't drink. So what would you say? Can we talk about each of those? I think there's going to be so much value for people in just us fleshing it out, really.
Yeah, definitely. I have a bit of a thing with alcohol. I mean, I'm not a big drinker. It's not to say I don't have a drink. I will definitely enjoy a drink from time to time, but I'm definitely not someone who goes to drinks a lot. And I find it very weird. I definitely find it weird that people think that you have to have alcohol there to have a conversation. I do get the fact that it can just, loosen things up a little bit. You can just, just get people talking. I understand that's where that would probably come from, but I don't think it's necessary. And I do think it's quite. I've definitely been to events where they only serve alcohol. In fact, I went to a network event only last week, and it was quite a posh place in a hotel, and the only drink they served was red or white wine.
Yeah.
It's a lunchtime event. I had to go drive and do some other stuff later on, so I was never going to drink there. And I just thought that was really strange to not offer it. It was weird. I mean, you could go and get a glass of water, but that was it. There was nothing else. So yeah, I have a bit of a challenge. I certainly have a challenge when events only offer alcohol. I think it's a bit strange to. I don't think networking requires alcohol. I think with a little bit of common sense, a little bit of some of the stuff we talk about, just dive into a conversation. I mean, so many people have a challenge with the word networking because I think of the word networking. Right. Like we said earlier, you go and have a drink with a friend in the pub. Yeah. You wouldn't ever call that networking, but you're doing exactly the same thing as networking. True. So I just don't see that you have to have alcohol to network. I just, it works in some situations, and certainly it depends on the culture. And sometimes I can certainly see the benefit of spending time in the bar, with people after an event, and that's where a lot of relationships happen. But if you don't feel comfortable doing that, I think there's ways and means around that. My biggest one, I'll always say, if you don't feel comfortable networking in a big group, ask people to go out for a coffee. Go and meet them one-on-one, and do it over Zoom if you're not geographically close. It doesn't have to be based on alcohol.
No, I agree. I think it's a really important point, and to acknowledge you don't. First of all, from the perspective of the person who doesn't drink, that shouldn't be a reason. The fact that there's alcohol at an event, don't let that be the reason why you don't go. One of the wonderful advantages that I love about being the non-drinker, I mean, sometimes I will have a glass of wine, but if you're not the non-drinker in an event where lots of people are drinking, you remember a lot more the next day than everybody else does. And that can be very, very useful in terms of connecting with people. I tend to not drink, but previously I might have had a glass of wine, but I tend to, if it's a networking event, I would stick to a non-alcoholic drink so that I can actually remember names, remember what people are saying, really engage and be properly connected.
I think it's fundamental. When you meet someone that you really want to build a relationship, let's say you've met someone out on a do and you think, right, they're a good person for me. We really need to build a relationship. I want to remember some details about them. If I've had a couple of drinks, then it's all okay. It's a bit free and easy. You'll have a good conversation. You'll have a good laugh. Yeah. But will I remember the next day? No, I won't. And even if I'm totally sober, by the way, I'll still jot a couple of notes down. I'll still think about it. Typically when I leave an event, or when I'm just on my way home, just on the train or whatever it might be, I'll just write a message to myself, right, follow up with X, talk about why, this is, just to give myself the memory jogger, because otherwise you forget, you can't retain everything.
That's right. And that's such good advice. I love that, because I always have my notebook. And one of the things in my podcast last week, where I was talking about some of those initial conversations with networking, and I spent quite a lot of time talking about names and remembering names, and I share my sort of strategy for remembering names, which includes writing them down. Lo and behold, it's groundbreaking method. But that point about actually treating networking, being strategic about it. So you've alluded to actually choosing where you go and network based on what your goal is, right? Writing down the notes so that you remember the important bits the next day and you have the information for following up. So I love that messaging that you deliver. And I think that was one of your categories as well in your test, but just that sort of having a target, right? And
indeed, yeah. I think target's really important. And just, you mentioned the word strategic, having a strategy. I mean, everyone loves referrals. Who doesn't like receiving a referral? It's great, opportunity to do business, not done deal for sure, but it's better converting chance because it's come from a basis of trust. So everyone loves getting them, but so many people are just have a reactive referral strategy. When a referral comes, great, I'll thank you.
Yeah.
What about having a proactive referral strategy? That's what I help people, my clients, put together.
Amazing. And that's definitely the biggest thing I've learned from you, actually. When I the results, I think it was 0 I scored in that particular area. I was like, oh, actually, why don't I actually measure and track the effectiveness of my networking, those referrals? So that's an amazing bit of advice. I know a lot of people wouldn't occur to them to actually track how successful their events have been, and use that to inform their decisions later. So I think that's an amazing bit of advice to end on. But before I let you go, Charlie, how can people find out more about you? Where to get? We didn't manage to get into your books. I've just bought actually the Unnatural Promoter. Maybe you could say a little bit about that, about your book, and also where people could find out more.
Yeah, sure. So there's 2 books. Unnatural Networker was the first one, as mentioned before, but the Unnatural Promoter, I've got to share a quick story where that came from.
Yeah,
it was the launch party for the Unnatural Networker. It was a do at the then office. The team in the office did an amazing job. It was an evening do, sort of 6 o'clock till 8 o'clock, something like that. You know, glasses of fizz, some nice canapes. They'd done the office out so beautifully. It was I could never do that. It's just not my skill set. And I knew, I mean, there were probably 70, 80 people coming along to I was going to say a few words and all that sort of thing. Where was I at 5 to 6 when the event was starting and people were coming in the door? I was upstairs checking my emails. I know rationally that people were there because they wanted to see me. They wanted to maybe get a signed copy of the book. They wanted to hear about my experience of writing the book. But I'm not comfortable at, promoting myself.
Right.
The moral of that story, by the way, if you don't feel comfortable promoting yourself, I put the subtitle of the book: How to Blow Your Own Trumpet, even when that feels awkward.
I love it. Yeah.
It's basically get a good network around you and get them to blow their trumpets about you. Get them. So that's what that one's about. In terms of finding out about them, I think there's 2 places you can connect with me. LinkedIn's definitely an easy one. You can see incidentally there that test we were just talking about. It's one of the featured posts there on my profile. And the other way is my website, unnaturalsuccess.com. Unnaturalsuccess.com. And you can find information about what I do. You can do the test there. You can see the books there as well. So yeah, that's a good place too.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Charlie. Well, I'm tempted you've dangled that carrot now, so I may have to get you back and we'll talk about blowing your own trumpet in a whole other conversation. But for now, everything you shared on being an unnatural networker, so valuable, so much gold in there. I know my audience for sure will have really appreciated this, and hopefully some of your extensive network will listen to it, and it will be reinforcing all of the messages that you're sharing with them all the time. I hope they'll find it really useful too. So thank you very much for your time. It's been a real pleasure to have you, and I look forward to, I'll see you on LinkedIn. Nice and regular.
Definitely. And yeah, thank you for having me on. Been a pleasure. Good fun.
My pleasure. Thanks a lot. Great. Fantastic. How did you find that, Charlie? Was that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. It still says live, by the way.
Yes. I'll start recording. My editor is used to. I'll be like, there's a whole.
As we start effing and blinding.